Well, during this day, I'm sure you've heard the word disciple or discipleship probably anywhere from about 2 to 3 dozen times. It's come up in different contexts here. But let me ask all of you, how many of you are disciples? I hope everybody has their hand up, right? Okay, if you say you're a disciple, here's a question that goes with that. What are you studying? You got to remember that the root word of disciple from the Latin discipulus means a learner, one who is constantly engaged in learning. It doesn't necessarily mean book learning, but we're constantly looking for ways to learn and to grow in our faith. If I'm a disciple, I'm going to keep growing. I am not going to allow myself to stagnate, and let's hope all of us are saying the same, and we're encouraging others to think and act in the same way as well. Well, the title of this talk, this hopefully short talk, mercifully short talk, is called The Marathon. So as we're running the race, Dale did the sprint, I'm doing the marathon, but I'm going to try to do it quickly like she did to give you some time to maybe discuss some ideas here. So I have a couple of scripture verses I'd like to share with you. First of all, and I think this is very fitting when we think of the long haul in a marathon, the length of the race. And this comes from Hebrews chapter 12, which follows what's often known as the faith chapter, chapter 11 of Hebrews, which gives a history of the Old Testament saints, as they're often called. We hear just a little snippet about Abel, Noah, Abraham, Jacob, and other Old Testament saints. What a great witness they have, that they acted by faith both in life and in death. And so the beginning of chapter 12, we see these words in summarizing chapter 11. It says, "Therefore, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses," boy, doesn't that just give you courage just knowing about that? We are surrounded by a cloud of witnesses. "Let us rid ourselves of every burden of sin that clings to us, and persevere in running the race that lies before us, while keeping our eyes fixed on Jesus." Are your eyes on Jesus? I hope you got your eyes fixed on Jesus, who is the leader and perfecter of faith. And my hope is that in running this race, when we get toward the end, we'll be able to say, as St. Paul said, and I invite you to read it together with me, "I have competed well, I have finished the race, I have kept the faith." So that is our goal, that we'll be able to say that I have finished the race, I've kept the faith throughout. A number of years ago, it's been about 6 years now, my wife and I looked at each other, and we tended to enjoy Christmas a little bit too much, so we got into the first weeks of the new year, and we said, stretchy clothes only stretch so far. So maybe we need to consider dropping a few pounds, getting in good shape. Let's make this kind of a New Year's resolution for us. So we had decided to join Weight Watchers, and during the meetings, they would always ask the new members and also reiterate throughout the meetings. The group leader would say, "What's your why? What is the main motivation for you wanting to lose weight?" And we'd have all different sorts of answers. Sometimes people would say, there might be a young lady that's planning to get married in the coming months. She'd say, "I want to fit into my wedding dress." Or a young man that's all excited about his 20th year class reunion coming up. "I want to look good for my class reunion. I want to show my classmates, hey, look at me," right? Or it could be some other motivation. But the hope with that question, "What's your why?" is you're really thinking long-term motivation. What is it you want to have? Now, the short-term goals are good, and I think necessary to kind of keep us going, but what's the long-term motivation? I really got an idea of that from what this one lady had shared. Now, she was probably, I would say, early to mid-60s, recently retired, and having a number of health issues, was walking with a cane, and she said, as tears were beginning to come down her eyes, she said, "You know what my why is? I just had a new grandson a couple of months ago. I want to be around to see him go to kindergarten. I want to be around to see him graduate from high school. If God chooses marriage for his future, I want to see him get married. And hopefully, I'll be able to play with my great-grandchildren as well. That's my why." So she was looking out long term. She was thinking about things that she was hoping to accomplish. So that's something that by helping people understand the why of what they're doing, in ministry, as well as its long-term implications, their level of commitment will be so much deeper. Sometimes we're thinking about, as Dale said, oh, we need a catechist, we need somebody to fill this job. And a lot of times, because we're used to using the word volunteer, we're just saying, let's fill this position, let's fill this task. But it needs to be much deeper than that. What's the why behind it? And by helping them to understand the why, they'll have a greater commitment. I'm going to give you an example. Happens in parishes all the time, but this particular young lady by the name of Jennifer, she was a mom of a 7-year-old son, and her son was starting 2nd grade, and she had decided to volunteer to be a catechist. Everyone know what a catechist is, by the way? It's not something that a cat did, right? But, right. So she wanted to teach her son's faith formation or religious education class, and also most of these children were preparing for their first Holy Communion as well. So it was really a fairly long-term commitment, 9 months or so. And the hope is that we would prepare her to be able to be successful in that marathon. And any of you who have been catechists, sometimes you get toward the end of the year and it's feeling like a marathon, right? And as you're getting toward the end of the school year too, the kids get a little bit more squirrely. Boy, I don't know if I'm going to make it that last couple of miles, but how can we prepare her to be successful? Well, first, it's important to help her see the long-term impact of her ministry. I think sometimes we might neglect to do that, not intentionally, but we forget to let them see what is the long-term impact, what is the potential that you can have, that you can do in this person's life. So I'd like to think about that for a minute. What would be a long-term impact of Jennifer's role as a faith formation instructor for those children? I'll take some different answers here. What would be one long-term impact? Remember, she's teaching 2nd graders, and she's also helping to prepare them for First Communion.
Successful preparation for communion.
Okay, so the question, and yeah, successful preparation for communion, so that's a long-term impact. Okay, what else?
Her son.
For her son?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah, the impact.
Stay in the faith. Yeah.
All right, helping people to really retain the faith. I saw a hand towards the back. Yes?
She's going to get reinvigorated in our own faith.
Yes, very good. Okay, yeah. Reinvigoration of our own faith. A lot of times, if you want to know more about something, you teach it, right? Because you learn along with the students as well. What else? Yes, ma'am. Okay, so the hope is that they would actually continue to practice their faith, right? Okay, and also maybe a lifelong love of the Eucharist. It's not just a one and done. It's not just okay, we're trying to get to this goal and then look at the next objective, but this is a lifelong practice. So that would hopefully be one of several long-term impacts of the ministry. So if we're preparing Jennifer and looking at this long-term impact of our ministry, what are some other things we can do to help her be successful in having that long-term impact? Now remember, new catechist, right? Just starting out. What can we do? Yes? Okay, now if I heard you correctly, you said have a mentor to kind of help her maybe with the planning and just some classroom methods and stuff like that. Okay, good. Maybe give some ideas. What else?
A whole series of books and tapes on First Communion and confession.
Okay. So utilize resources. I'm going to guess you were a catechist, by the way, right? I'm going to guess you were a catechist. Oh, well, you seem to know quite a bit about it, though, but thank you. You're right, a lot of resources out there. What else?
Hook her up with someone who has done this before, who can tell their story of what it's done to them in their life, being able.
Yeah, kind of partner with somebody, sort of like the mentor idea that can kind of share how it affected them. Yes, over here. Sorry, I didn't see you first.
To me, it's like preparing for, if she teaches that child to make right choices, then maybe he'll go on and think about what his really goal in life is, to get to heaven, and that should be part of our choices during lifetime forever.
Very good. Yes, you're thinking about the long-term impact of the ministry, but that's a great answer. Thank you for sharing that. Right. So a lot of things that we could do to help to ensure her success. What else? I saw another hand there.
Engaging parents that are involved and other parents that are involved
Right. So really kind of making it a community effort. I heard yesterday when I asked the question to the group, regularly praying with the catechist, so having her involved in prayer. If there are any kind of retreat days, anything like that. A lot of other ideas that I'm sure you all would have. I'll take one more towards the back there. Recognition and thanks, yes. And Dale hammered that one, and I can't emphasize that enough as well. So thank you for mentioning that again. Notice I said thank you, by the way. So, all right. I had a number of years ago, longer than I care to admit, but it's been over 25 years ago. I was also a faith formation director, so I worked with catechists, and prior to that, I was a catechist myself. But one of my 6th grade catechists was a gentleman by the name of Pat. And Pat and his wife were just the most lovely people you ever want to meet. The 2 children were the nicest kids. The family was very, very involved in the parish. So Pat taught 6th grade. His wife was an assistant in a 1st grade class. So they just bought in. They were really invested in the parish. And Pat was a former seminarian. In 6th grade, the emphasis in that curriculum was the Hebrew Scriptures, or the Old Testament. So he was on fire. He loved it, and he figured that those kids would love it as well. Remember, I said that he was teaching 6th graders. Okay, so you know the age, about age 11 or 12, right? And with that age group, they don't necessarily take things dealing with faith and religion all that seriously that much. So Pat kind of ran into that obstacle, and no matter how hard he prepared, and he was a great planner, he had some awesome lesson plans. I just went in just to listen to him sometimes. And he would come out sometimes just very deflated, just feeling very discouraged. And he would say to me, Rick, I just feel like I'm wasting my time here. I just don't feel like those kids are going to get it. I don't know why I'm even doing this. And over the course of the year, Pat got to know me pretty well, because at the beginning of the year, I told the catechist about the parable of the seed and the sower. Everyone's pretty much heard that numerous times before, but I tried to help them to see it through new eyes, because we are participating along with the farmer. We're throwing the seed. We're planting seeds. And so every time Pat would come to me throughout the year expressing his frustration, I would say, Pat, I said, remember the parable of the seed and the sower. And by the 3rd time I said this, he said, I know, we're planting seeds. But he got it, and I said, yes, we are planting seeds, and we're not in charge of the growth. God's going to take care of the growth part. We don't know how or when that's going to take root and sprout, but it will in some way. So I said, you just keep scattering seeds, do your job, God's going to do his job. And I think we need to remember that too. But what is the long-term effect of that? We trust the results to God. I want to just think about 3 questions, and then I'm going to have one discussion item for your tables to give you a few minutes to do it. But 3 questions. Number 1 is, what are some upcoming initiatives in your parish, or upcoming activities? Maybe just looking at the calendar, you've got several things that are coming up, whether it's a parish mission or some other event. So what are the long-term objectives for each of those initiatives that you have coming up? What is the hope long-term that will really bring about? Okay, so that's the first question. The second one is, how do we bring people into a long-term, interpreted as lifetime, commitment as disciples, learners, even if their involvement is only for a short-term ministry? If it's kind of a one and done, hopefully from that experience, they'll want to take this on for life in some way. They want to commit as disciples. And third, what is the long-term impact of each event and ministry in your parish? And that would be a little bit of time invested to look at each of the ministries and say, what is the long-term impact that it just might have? And going back to what Megan had said before, I think it's important to see if that lines up with your parish mission statement, or if maybe it doesn't. And then to say, is this a good time to rethink if that ministry needs to continue in the parish? So some things to think about. Well, what I'd like you to discuss at your table for the next, let's see what time we got now. Okay, for about the next 9 minutes is this question. I want you to think about 1 or 2 events that are being planned for your parish and the why that is driving them. What is your why for those events? and what is the long-term impact, the potential impact of each of those events. So 9 minutes, and let's go ahead and start with your table discussion right now.